All the young Apache woman wanted was a sham marriage. What she received was a cowboy's heart. Lila had grown up surrounded by the wide, open plains of Arizona, where the wind whispered through the tall grasses and the sun painted golden streaks across the desert every morning. Life on the outskirts of the Apache reservation was quiet, but it was full of small responsibilities that shaped her from a young age. From helping her mother with chores to learning the stories of her people from her grandmother, Lila understood the importance of family and tradition. She respected these things deeply, but she also had her own ideas about life, dreams that didn't always match what others expected of her. She was in her early 20s, at an age when many young women around her were thinking of marriage and family. Her parents had spoken often about her future, and while they were loving and kind, they were also practical. In their eyes, a good marriage was not just about love. It was about safety, stability, and honor. Lila listened politely during these conversations, but inside, she wrestled with her own desires. She admired her family's values, but she also longed for independence. She wanted to make choices for herself, to have control over her own life, and she didn't want to feel trapped by tradition. That's why she had come up with the idea of a sham marriage. To her, it wasn't dishonest, it was practical. She could meet her family's expectations without giving up her independence. She could marry someone she trusted, have the arrangement be formal and respectful, but not let it interfere with her personal goals. It seemed like the perfect solution. Lila had thought it through carefully. She knew the kind of man she wanted, someone responsible, honorable, and trustworthy, but someone who would understand the limits of the agreement. She didn't want passion, she didn't want chaos, she wanted simplicity. Lila's friends didn't always understand her plan. Some teased her, saying she was too clever, too cautious. Others warned her that life had a way of surprising people, that arrangements and rules rarely lasted when emotions got involved. Lila listened, but she smiled politely and dismissed their worries. She was confident that she could navigate the situation carefully. She was intelligent, observant, and above all, determined. She would make the sham marriage work exactly as she intended. Her life had always been surrounded by nature. Each morning, she would wake to the soft light spilling through the cracks of the wooden shutters in her room. The sound of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the distant lowing of cattle formed a rhythm to her days. Lila enjoyed this peacefulness, but she also felt a restless curiosity about the world outside the reservation. She had seen travelers pass through, people with different clothes, different ways of speaking, and different dreams. Sometimes, she imagined what it would be like to meet someone from outside her small community, someone who could bring new ideas and experiences into her life without threatening the safety she cherished. It was during one of these quiet days that she began thinking seriously about finding her perfect candidate for the sham marriage. She didn't want someone from far away. Traveling and long-distance arrangements would be complicated, but she also didn't want someone too close to home. The perfect choice would be someone steady, who had a reputation for honesty and hard work, but who would respect boundaries. She made a list in her mind: age, values, temperament, family background. Lila approached this list with a careful seriousness, as though choosing a marriage partner was a business decision. In many ways, it was. She wanted this arrangement to protect her, to honor her family, and to maintain her freedom. She did not want to risk her heart. The idea of a sham marriage had come to her gradually. At first, it was just a thought, a fleeting daydream about marrying someone in name only. But as she considered her future more seriously, the thought transformed into a plan. She had seen other families in her community make similar choices. Some arranged marriages were not about love. They were about security, about connection, about preserving tradition. Lila respected those choices, and she realized she could adapt that idea in a way that worked for her own life. She imagined a ceremony with her family's approval, a promise that would satisfy the elders, and a quiet understanding with her partner that their relationship was built on agreement, not passion. Yet even as she embraced this practical approach, Lila could not deny the flicker of excitement that the idea brought. The thought of meeting someone new, someone who might understand and accept her plan, was thrilling. It made her heart race in a gentle, anticipatory way. She knew she was ready to meet someone who could be part of her plan. She had confidence in her ability to navigate this carefully, but she also felt a tiny spark of hope that life might surprise her. She tried not to dwell on that hope. for she feared it could complicate everything she had so neatly organized in her mind. One day, while helping her grandmother prepare traditional herbs for a small ceremony, Lila spoke openly about her intentions. "I want a marriage that is simple," she said softly, her voice carrying both determination and a touch of nervousness. Her grandmother, a wise and gentle woman, listened carefully. She did not interrupt or judge, she only nodded. "You must protect your heart, Lila," she said. "But remember, hearts are like rivers, they may flow where you least expect." Lila smiled, acknowledging the wisdom, but she still believed she could control her own path. She would be careful. She would choose wisely. She would make the sham marriage work. In the weeks that followed, Lila began observing the men in her community more closely. She watched how they treated their families, how they interacted with neighbors, and how they conducted themselves during work or social gatherings. She was meticulous, taking mental notes, imagining who might respect her boundaries and honor the agreement she had in mind. It became a careful, almost scientific process. She measured temperament, reliability, and respect. Each observation brought her closer to identifying the right person. She was patient, knowing that rushing would be a mistake. As the seasons changed, Lila's resolve only strengthened. She understood that her plan was unusual, and perhaps others might not fully understand it, but she was comfortable with her choices. She believed that the right partner would appear, someone who could balance practicality with understanding. She kept her heart protected, her mind clear, and her intentions strong. Life was moving forward, but Lila felt a quiet anticipation, a sense that her careful planning was about to meet reality. She did not yet know how, when, or where, but she had faith in her approach. By the time the desert flowers began to bloom with the first warmth of spring, Lila was ready. She had made her decision to actively search for someone suitable for her sham marriage. She approached the task with seriousness, speaking discreetly to families she trusted and keeping her intentions clear. She was determined to find someone honorable, someone who could fulfill the role she needed without challenging the rules she had set for herself. Lila's confidence was steady, her hope measured. She was ready to take the next step in her carefully designed plan. And so, with the wide skies above and the endless plains around her, Lila took her first steps toward finding the right person. She was filled with a sense of purpose, a quiet strength, and a careful optimism. She had a plan, she had a vision, and she had faith in her ability to shape her own future. What she did not yet know was that life had a way of surprising even the most careful minds. What she intended to be a simple, controlled arrangement was about to take a turn she could never have anticipated. A journey that would challenge her ideas, touch her heart, and change her life forever. Spring had settled over the Arizona plains, bringing warmth to the mornings, and a soft, golden glow to the evenings. Lila had spent weeks preparing herself, quietly observing the community and thinking carefully about who might be the right choice for her sham marriage. Her plan was clear: find someone honorable, reliable, and willing to respect the boundaries she needed. She had met a few men who seemed like possibilities, but none had matched the qualities she valued most. Then one afternoon, at a fair held near the outskirts of town, she met Caleb. Caleb was a cowboy through and through. His suntanned skin and worn hat spoke of long days under the open sky, riding horses, and working the land. His hands were strong but gentle, evidence of years of physical labor tempered by care. He had a quiet demeanor, one that gave the impression he listened carefully before speaking. People trusted him because he was honest and hardworking. Lila noticed him immediately, not for his appearance alone, but for the way he treated those around him, with respect, patience, and a sense of calm that seemed rare in the world. The fair was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of sweet fried bread. Families moved together through the stalls. Children ran excitedly with ribbons and balloons, and local artisans displayed handcrafted items. Lila wandered through the fair, pretending to examine the handmade jewelry and baskets, but her mind was focused on the task she had set for herself. She observed the people carefully, noting the interactions and behavior of those around her. It was then that she noticed Caleb helping a young boy retrieve a lost toy. He didn't rush. He knelt patiently, speaking gently until the child smiled and took the toy with gratitude. Lila felt a small spark of admiration. He was the kind of man who could be trusted, she thought. With her heart steady but alert, Lila approached him. She introduced herself politely, keeping her tone calm and measured. "Hello, I'm Lila," she said. Caleb looked up, his eyes warm and curious. "Hi, I'm Caleb," he replied, offering a handshake. It was firm but not overpowering, a small gesture that immediately gave her a sense of security. They spoke about the fair, about the weather, and about life on the land. Lila was careful to maintain casual conversation, while also observing Caleb's reactions, his respect for her words, and the ease with which he spoke. After a while, Lila took a deep breath and approached the delicate topic she had planned to introduce. She explained her situation with honesty and clarity, carefully choosing her words. "I have a plan," she said softly. "It may seem unusual, but I am looking for a marriage arrangement that is simple, a union for family and security without expectations beyond that. I respect the idea of love, but I need a practical agreement first." Caleb listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. He was quiet for a moment, thinking before responding. At first, he seemed hesitant. The idea of a marriage for convenience was foreign to him, yet he was intrigued by Lila's honesty. Most people hid their intentions or pretended to conform to tradition, but Lila had spoken openly. He admired her courage and clarity. After considering the proposal, he agreed, not because he lacked feelings, but because he respected her plan and her desire to maintain control of her own life. He promised to honor her boundaries and to treat her with the respect she deserved. It was an agreement based on trust, understanding, and mutual consideration, the kind of arrangement Lila had been seeking. The days following their agreement were filled with careful planning. Lila and Caleb spent time discussing the logistics of the sham marriage, ensuring that everything was respectful and aligned with both their needs. They agreed on simple ceremonies, clear boundaries, and the involvement of their families in ways that would honor tradition without complicating their personal arrangement. For Lila, it was reassuring to have such clarity. She felt confident in her ability to maintain independence while also fulfilling her family's expectations. As they spent more time together, Lila began to notice small things about Caleb that she appreciated deeply. The way he carefully tended the horses, the gentle way he spoke to the elderly, and his willingness to help without seeking attention. All of these details made her respect him even more. She realized that while the marriage was meant to be a practical arrangement, she found herself enjoying his company. Conversations that were meant to be brief and purposeful began to extend, filled with humor, stories, and laughter. They discovered shared interests, from a love of the land to an appreciation for quiet, reflective moments. Caleb, too, found himself affected by Lila in ways he hadn't expected. Her intelligence, her strength, and her sense of responsibility impressed him. She carried herself with confidence, yet there was warmth in her smile and softness in her voice that drew him in. He respected her autonomy and her careful approach to life, but he also found himself wanting to know her more deeply. Though he had agreed to the sham marriage out of respect, he felt a growing curiosity and admiration that went beyond practicality. Their families were involved in the discussions, offering guidance and blessings while respecting the unusual nature of the arrangement. Lila's parents were initially cautious, unsure if Caleb would truly honor their daughter's wishes, but they were reassured by his sincerity and consistent behavior. Caleb's family, though surprised by the proposal, appreciated Lila's honesty and the thoughtfulness with which she approached the situation. Everyone involved recognized that this arrangement required trust and integrity, and both Lila and Caleb demonstrated these qualities in abundance. During this period, Lila continued her daily routines with care. She rose early, helping with chores, preparing meals, and tending to the small garden near her home. She found comfort in these familiar routines, and yet there was a new energy in her life. The presence of Caleb, even in a practical context, brought a sense of companionship she had not anticipated. They shared tasks, taught each other small skills, and developed a rhythm that made their coexistence natural and smooth. The partnership, though initially intended to be formal and limited, began to feel comfortable and reassuring. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the desert sky in shades of orange and pink, Lila and Caleb sat quietly outside. The air was warm, and the gentle rustling of the leaves created a calming background. Lila reflected on the days that had passed since their meeting. She realized that the arrangement, though practical, had already brought a sense of ease and companionship she had not expected. She felt gratitude for Caleb's understanding and respect, and she allowed herself a small, private smile at the thought that perhaps life could be both practical and pleasant at the same time. Caleb, watching the fading sunlight, felt a quiet admiration for Lila. He had entered this arrangement expecting clarity and boundaries, but he found himself increasingly drawn to her spirit, her intelligence, and her gentle strength. He appreciated her honesty and the way she conducted herself, and he felt a protective, respectful inclination to ensure her comfort and happiness. The companionship they shared was evolving subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet he sensed that something meaningful was forming, even if neither of them fully understood it yet. Over the following weeks, Lila and Caleb continued to meet, plan, and interact with a sense of purpose. Each conversation, each shared task, each moment spent together reinforced the sense of trust and reliability between them. Lila remained careful to maintain her boundaries, honoring the practical nature of their agreement, while Caleb respected her wishes and ensured that his presence was supportive and respectful. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience, observation, and consistent behavior. Though the arrangement was meant to be simple, life had a way of adding complexity. Lila noticed her own thoughts lingering on Caleb more often than she expected. She found herself curious about his feelings, wondering if he, too, found their interactions more enjoyable than anticipated. She reminded herself of the agreement, of the practical reasons behind their union, and of the careful plan she had created. Yet she could not deny the small stirrings of something deeper, a gentle curiosity, a quiet admiration, and a subtle warmth that came from sharing her days with someone so considerate. Caleb, meanwhile, felt similar emotions. He found himself anticipating Lila's presence, valuing her opinions, and enjoying the calmness she brought to his life. He respected her independence, but he also began to appreciate the rare connection that had formed between them. Though he had agreed to a sham marriage out of respect for her plan, he realized that this arrangement was offering him something unexpected, companionship that felt genuine, stable, and comforting. By the end of the spring, their arrangement was firmly in place. They had defined boundaries, shared responsibilities, and the approval of their families. Yet beneath the practical layers, an invisible bond had begun to form, a quiet understanding, a subtle trust, and a gentle appreciation for each other. Lila's plan for a sham marriage was unfolding exactly as she intended on the surface, but the underlying currents hinted at something more, a possibility that would challenge her expectations, test her careful planning, and touch her heart in ways she had not yet imagined. And so the stage was set. Lila and Caleb had entered into a practical, carefully structured agreement with clear boundaries and mutual understanding. Yet life had already begun to show signs that this union, intended to be simple, could evolve into something more complex, meaningful, and unexpectedly profound. The journey had begun, and neither of them could yet see how much their lives would intertwine, how deeply their connection would grow, and how the arrangement meant to protect their independence would soon bring them closer in ways neither had anticipated. As summer approached, the days grew longer, and the desert sun bathed the plains in warm, golden light. Lila and Caleb's arrangement continued smoothly, the boundaries clear and the expectations understood. Yet, as the sun rose and set over the wide open land, something began to shift in the quiet moments they shared. What had begun as a simple, practical agreement started to develop unexpected depth. Neither of them could yet name it, but both felt its presence in the small details of their everyday life. Mornings often began with shared tasks. Lila would rise early, her hair still tousled from sleep, and head to the small garden behind her home. Caleb would already be outside, tending to the horses or repairing fences. Their interactions were practical at first, passing tools, sharing water, guiding the animals. But over time, they began to speak more naturally. Lila found herself laughing at Caleb's quiet humor, the small jokes he made about the stubborn mule or the mischievous foal. He admired her skill with the plants and the care she took with each sprout and leaf. The mundane chores, once routine and solitary, became moments of companionship. They began to notice each other's habits in ways that went beyond practicality. Lila observed the careful way Caleb measured every step he took while repairing the fence, ensuring it would hold strong through storms. She watched him pause sometimes to look at the horizon, taking in the beauty of the landscape before continuing his work. Caleb, in turn, noticed Lila's attentiveness to small details. How she arranged the herbs for drying, how she spoke to the chickens with gentle patience, and how her eyes sparkled when she smiled at the simple wonders of the world. These observations, small and quiet, created a bond that neither of them expected. Despite their careful agreement, Lila began to feel a sense of comfort she had not anticipated. She had intended the sham marriage to be practical, devoid of emotional complications, but she found herself seeking Caleb's presence. His company was steadying, a source of calm in the unpredictable moments of life on the reservation. She appreciated the way he listened without judgment, how he offered advice when asked but never imposed his opinion. For the first time in a long while, Lila felt understood, not because someone agreed with everything she thought or felt, but because she sensed genuine respect and care beneath his quiet demeanor. Caleb felt a similar pull. He had entered the arrangement expecting simplicity, yet he found himself thinking about Lila even during tasks that had nothing to do with her. He appreciated the way she approached life, her intelligence, her responsibility, and her courage. He admired the way she spoke her mind, yet tempered her words with patience and thoughtfulness. He respected her boundaries, but he also felt a growing desire to know her more deeply, to share in her joys and struggles. The bond forming between them was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it was real, and it was growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm swept across the plains. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly turning into a steady downpour. Caleb and Lila were outside, checking the fences and securing the animals. The wind was fierce, the rain stinging their faces, and the sky threatening to burst with lightning. They worked side by side, shouting instructions over the roar of the storm, but there was a sense of exhilaration in the shared effort. When the last gate was secured and the animals were safe, they stood together, drenched and breathless, laughing at the intensity of the moment. In that shared laughter, something shifted. The storm, which should have been stressful and exhausting, became a moment of connection. Lila realized she felt relief and gratitude simply because Caleb was there, steadfast and reliable. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how his voice carried warmth even over the storm's noise. Caleb, too, felt a surge of admiration for Lila's bravery and composure. In that moment, the practical boundaries of their arrangement seemed to fade, replaced by a shared experience that neither could ignore. Evenings brought their own kind of closeness. After the day's work, they would sit outside on a small wooden porch, watching the sun set behind distant mesas. The sky would turn shades of pink and purple, and the wind would carry the scent of wildflowers and dust. These quiet moments, filled with conversation or comfortable silence, became a routine neither wanted to end. They shared stories of their childhood, hopes for the future, and dreams that had seemed distant or impossible. Lila spoke of her family's history, the traditions that shaped her, and the ways she hoped to honor them while living her own life. Caleb shared tales of his work on the ranch, his memories of long days under the sun, and the people who had taught him about resilience and kindness. Through these exchanges, they began to see the deeper layers of each other. Lila saw Caleb not just as a reliable man, but as someone with empathy, humor, and a quiet wisdom that came from years of observing life closely. Caleb saw Lila not just as an intelligent and independent woman, but as someone with courage, warmth, and a strong moral compass that guided every choice she made. The admiration was mutual, unspoken, but present, growing in strength with each day spent together. At times, Lila caught herself wondering what it would be like if the marriage were real, if the boundaries were lifted, and if emotions were allowed to flourish. She reminded herself of the practical reasons for their arrangement, but the thoughts lingered, persistent and tender. Caleb, too, found his mind wandering, imagining moments beyond their carefully defined roles. Shared laughter in the kitchen, quiet walks under the stars, and evenings spent simply talking and listening. They both understood the risks of such feelings, yet they could not deny the gentle pull drawing them closer. Their families noticed the change, though neither Lila nor Caleb spoke openly about it. Friends commented on their laughter, their ease around each other, and the way they seemed to anticipate each other's needs. Lila's parents saw the subtle respect and care Caleb showed their daughter, and though they had initially approved the arrangement for practical reasons, they began to sense a genuine connection forming. Caleb's family observed Lila's patience, intelligence, and kindness, and they, too, recognized that something meaningful was emerging between them. One day, while gathering firewood together, Lila slipped on a damp rock near the riverbank. Caleb was quick to catch her, steadying her with a firm hand and a calm voice. "Careful," he said gently, concern clear in his eyes. Lila smiled, brushing off the fear that had passed through her in a moment, and thanked him. The incident was small, but it lingered in her mind. She realized how much she valued his presence, how comforting it was to know he would be there when needed. Caleb, too, reflected on the moment, feeling a protective warmth that went beyond simple respect. Over the weeks, small gestures began to carry greater meaning. A shared cup of tea in the morning, a kind word when the day was hard, a quiet compliment offered without expectation. All of these moments wove a subtle tapestry of connection between them. Lila began to notice that her heart felt lighter, that her days were brighter, and that she looked forward to Caleb's presence in ways that went beyond practicality. Caleb, similarly, felt a growing sense of joy in her company, a deepening appreciation that touched him quietly but profoundly. Despite the deepening bond, both remained cautious. They remembered the agreement, the clear boundaries, and the original purpose of their arrangement. They valued the trust they had built and did not want to jeopardize it with unspoken feelings. Yet, the tension between duty and emotion grew, and each found it increasingly difficult to separate the two. Lila's careful planning had given her security, but it had also brought her closer to a heart she had not intended to reach. Caleb's respect and admiration had turned into a gentle longing, a desire to know her fully and to share life's moments beyond the agreement. One evening, as the stars appeared one by one in the clear desert sky, Lila and Caleb sat near a small campfire. The flames flickered and cast soft shadows across their faces. They shared stories of their childhoods, recalling moments of joy and challenge, and spoke of dreams that had yet to be realized. In the quiet of the night, Lila felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire, a sense of connection that was both unexpected and comforting. Caleb felt the same, the bond between them growing stronger with every word, every laugh, and every silence shared. As the night deepened, Lila realized that their relationship, though still framed by the agreement, had grown into something far more significant. She felt a sense of gratitude for Caleb's presence, a trust that went beyond words, and an awareness that her carefully planned boundaries could not contain the bond that had developed. Caleb, too, recognized that the simple arrangement had evolved into companionship, mutual respect, and the beginnings of affection. Neither could predict where it would lead, but both sensed that their lives were becoming intertwined in ways that would shape the future. And so, as the desert night stretched above them, Lila and Caleb sat together, aware of the growing connection between them. The sham marriage, intended as a practical arrangement, had already begun to touch their hearts. Small gestures, shared moments, and quiet understanding had woven a bond neither could ignore. They were both cautious, aware of the agreement and the boundaries it set, but they could not deny the subtle, profound shift in their relationship. The stage was set for a deeper journey, one that would test their hearts, challenge their expectations, and lead them to discoveries neither had anticipated. Summer was at its peak, and the Arizona plains were alive with color and sound. The air was warm and dry, the sky wide and open, stretching endlessly above the land. For Lila and Caleb, life continued in its quiet rhythm, yet the subtle bond between them had grown stronger than ever. What had begun as a sham marriage for convenience was now becoming a delicate mix of trust, care, and unspoken emotion. Each day together brought them closer, and yet the boundaries they had agreed upon remained in place, an invisible fence that both protected and frustrated them. The challenge came quietly at first. Rumors began to spread among their neighbors and families. People noticed the way Lila and Caleb laughed together, the small gestures of care, and the ease with which they shared tasks. Some whispered about the closeness, others questioned whether their arrangement was truly as simple as it seemed. Lila tried to ignore it, focusing on her responsibilities and the careful structure of their agreement. Caleb, too, remained composed, insisting to himself that appearances did not matter, that their bond was private and respectful. But whispers have a way of growing, and soon even their families began to notice. Lila's parents, who had once approved the arrangement with cautious optimism, began asking questions. They were proud of their daughter's intelligence and independence, but they could not ignore the growing affection between her and Caleb. Lila felt a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She had planned for practicality, for a relationship without emotional entanglement, but now emotions were intruding, and she was unsure how to handle them. Caleb noticed the tension too. He could see the concern in Lila's eyes whenever her parents spoke to her, and he felt the subtle disapproval of neighbors who questioned his intentions. At the same time, he realized that he could no longer ignore his own feelings. The admiration and respect he felt for Lila had grown into something deeper, something he could not contain within the boundaries of their original agreement. He found himself worrying about her happiness, thinking about her long after their shared tasks were complete, and feeling a protective pull he had never expected. The true test of their bond arrived suddenly. A wildfire had started on a distant ridge, and strong winds carried sparks dangerously close to the reservation and Caleb's ranch. The fire spread quickly, threatening homes, livestock, and the safety of the community. Panic swept through the area, and both Lila and Caleb sprang into action. The carefully maintained calm of their daily lives was replaced by urgency and fear. They had to work together, relying on each other in ways that tested their trust and courage. Lila moved swiftly, coordinating with her family and neighbors to ensure everyone was safe. She guided children and elders to secure areas, checked on animals, and helped carry supplies. Caleb was equally focused, riding out to warn others, securing fences, and assisting with the evacuation of livestock. Throughout the chaos, they stayed near each other, moving as a team. Their hands brushed while passing buckets of water, their voices carried over the crackling of flames, and their eyes met in moments of silent reassurance. The emergency forced them to rely completely on one another, revealing the depth of connection that had been growing beneath the surface. As the fire raged closer, Lila and Caleb found themselves in a particularly dangerous area. Smoke thickened and heat pressed in from all sides. Lila struggled to remain calm, but fear was inevitable. Caleb grabbed her hand firmly, steadying her with a strength that went beyond the physical. "We're going to be fine," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a certainty that helped calm her panic. In that moment, Lila realized just how much she depended on him, not just for physical safety, but for emotional support. She felt a surge of trust and gratitude that went beyond anything she had planned for in their sham marriage. The danger passed, but the emotional impact remained. When the fire was finally contained and the smoke cleared, both were exhausted, covered in soot and sweat, but relieved. The experience had drawn them closer in a way that neither could ignore. Lila, who had always prided herself on careful planning and emotional restraint, felt a quiet, undeniable pull toward Caleb. She could no longer dismiss the warmth in her chest when she looked at him, or the way her heart raced during even the smallest gestures of care. Caleb, too, felt a profound shift. The practical boundaries they had established seemed suddenly inadequate to contain the depth of feeling he now realized he held. The days that followed were difficult. Both struggled to reconcile the reality of their emotions with the original agreement. Lila found herself avoiding long conversations about feelings, trying instead to focus on chores, planning, and the practical details of daily life. Yet even in silence, Caleb's presence brought her comfort and joy. She found herself stealing glances at him while he worked, feeling a flutter of something she could not name. Caleb noticed, of course, and felt the same nervous excitement in response. The emotional tension between them was palpable, but neither wanted to break the fragile trust that had been built. Family and neighbors added to the pressure. Questions were asked, advice was given, and subtle judgments were made. Lila's parents, though supportive of her independence, could not ignore the closeness developing between their daughter and Caleb. They began to hint, gently, that perhaps what had started as a practical arrangement might be more than that. Caleb's family, too, noticed changes in his behavior and commented on the way he seemed more thoughtful, more attentive, and more protective than before. Both Lila and Caleb felt the weight of these observations, understanding that the community was aware of the bond growing between them. In private, they struggled to talk openly. Conversations about feelings were often avoided, replaced with practical discussions or shared tasks. Yet every shared glance, Every quiet moment of understanding brought them closer. Lila began to notice small signs of Caleb's affection. The way he would pause to check if she was comfortable, the small compliments he offered without expectation, the subtle care in his actions. Caleb noticed Lila's reactions, how her smile brightened when he offered support, how her laughter lingered longer in his memory, and how her presence brought a calm he could not replicate elsewhere. One evening, after another long day of work and community recovery, they found themselves sitting quietly near a river that ran through the plains. The sun was setting, painting the sky with brilliant hues of orange and pink. Silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. Lila finally spoke, her voice soft and hesitant. "Caleb, I don't know how to feel about all of this," she admitted. "I thought I could keep everything simple, but I feel more than I expected." Caleb looked at her, his expression gentle and understanding. "I feel the same," he said quietly. "I didn't expect it either, but it's real and I can't ignore it anymore." The admission was both frightening and freeing. They realized that the boundaries of their sham marriage could no longer contain the emotions that had developed naturally between them. What had started as a practical arrangement had grown into something deeper, something neither had anticipated but both had come to value. They felt fear of vulnerability, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown, but also relief in acknowledging the truth that had been growing quietly for weeks. The wildfire and its aftermath had served as a catalyst. In facing danger together, Lila and Caleb had discovered a profound connection, one built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. The practical agreement had provided structure, but it had also allowed space for emotions to emerge naturally. They realized that their bond was not simply convenient, it was real, meaningful, and capable of withstanding challenges. Even as they acknowledged their feelings, the road ahead remained uncertain. Both had responsibilities, families, and communities to consider. The transition from a sham marriage to a genuine emotional connection would require careful navigation. They would need to communicate openly, support each other's independence, and continue to honor the respect and trust they had built. Yet for the first time, they felt a sense of excitement and hope about the future. In the quiet of the desert night, with the stars reflecting in the river and the soft sound of water flowing, Lila and Caleb sat together, hand in hand. Neither spoke for a long time, simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. The fear, tension, and uncertainty had not disappeared, but they were tempered by understanding, trust, and the growing realization that their feelings were mutual. The sham marriage had become something far more profound, a partnership in every sense of the word, rooted in respect, trust, and love that neither had planned but both cherished. And so, as the night deepened, they sat together, aware of the challenges that lay ahead, but also of the extraordinary bond they had discovered. The fire had tested them, the whispers had pressured them, and their own emotions had complicated the arrangement. Yet they had emerged stronger, closer, and more aware of the depth of connection that had grown between them. The stage was set for the final chapter of their story, a moment of choice, commitment, and the possibility of a love that had grown quietly from a practical beginning into something extraordinary. The air had turned crisp as summer faded into early autumn, and the desert plains glowed with warm hues of gold, red, and brown. Lila and Caleb had lived through weeks of closeness, uncertainty, and quiet tension. The wildfire and the whispers of the community had shown them how strong their bond had grown. And now, with cooler days approaching, the question that had lingered unspoken finally demanded an answer. What would they do with the feelings that had quietly taken root between them? For Lila, the challenge was simple and yet profound. She had always prided herself on her careful planning and independence. The sham marriage had been a practical solution to meet her family's expectations without surrendering her autonomy. But over time, the companionship she shared with Caleb had become far more than a convenience. It had become a source of comfort, strength, and warmth. She found herself thinking of him during quiet moments, remembering the small ways he showed care and attention, and feeling a subtle ache when they were apart. Lila knew she had to confront these feelings honestly, no matter how unexpected they were. Caleb, meanwhile, had also wrestled with his emotions. He had entered the agreement respecting Lila's wishes, but over time, he had discovered an admiration and affection for her that he could not contain. He cared for her deeply, not only for her intelligence and independence, but also for her kindness, courage, and gentle heart. Each shared morning, each evening spent under the stars, and each quiet moment of conversation had drawn him closer. Now, with the fire behind them and the weeks of shared life woven into their routines, Caleb could no longer pretend that their connection was merely practical. He had to acknowledge the truth, to himself, to Lila, and eventually to their families. The turning point came on a calm autumn morning. Lila was in the garden, tending her herbs and vegetables when Caleb arrived from the ranch. He carried a small bundle of firewood, but his eyes were focused on her, a mixture of determination and uncertainty in his gaze. Lila looked up and smiled politely, unaware of the weight behind his expression. Caleb approached slowly, setting the firewood down beside her, and then took a deep breath. "Lila," he began, his voice steady but soft, "we need to talk about us." Lila paused, sensing the seriousness in his tone. She set aside her gardening tools and nodded. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted. "I didn't expect to feel this way. I thought I could keep everything simple, but it's not simple anymore." Caleb reached out, gently taking her hand. The touch was firm, reassuring, yet filled with a tenderness that made Lila's heart beat faster. "I know," he said quietly. "I didn't plan for this either, but I care for you, Lila. More than I should, perhaps, but I can't ignore it. And I don't think you can either." The conversation unfolded slowly, carefully, with honesty and openness. They spoke of the past weeks, of the ways their feelings had developed unnoticed, of the challenges they faced from tradition, family expectations, and their own caution. There was fear in their words, yes, but also relief, because the acknowledgement of their emotions lifted a burden they had been carrying quietly. Lila realized that she no longer wished for a sham marriage alone. She wanted something real, something that could grow alongside the respect and trust they had already built. Caleb expressed the same longing, admitting that he wanted their bond to reflect the depth of their connection. With the conversation complete, they embraced the idea of transforming their practical arrangement into a true partnership. They agreed to move forward together, balancing love with respect, independence with companionship, and tradition with personal choice. The process required patience, dialogue, and understanding, but both were committed to making it work. Lila's heart, once cautious and measured, now held a quiet joy and anticipation for the life they could build together. Caleb, who had approached their agreement with caution, now felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment he had never imagined. Family discussions followed. Lila's parents, though initially concerned about the shift from a practical arrangement to emotional commitment, listened to her explanation and observed Caleb's sincerity. They saw the respect, care, and trust that had developed and realized that the young cowboy truly valued their daughter. After careful consideration, they offered their blessing, acknowledging that while life rarely followed exact plans, genuine connection and love deserved support. Caleb's family, too, offered their approval, recognizing the growth and depth of the bond between the two. With family support, the path forward became clearer, and both Lila and Caleb felt a sense of relief and security. As the days passed, the couple began to weave their daily lives together in new ways. Mornings were shared over breakfast, conversations flowing naturally as they planned tasks for the day. They continued working on the ranch and in the garden, but now with an added warmth in their interactions. Lila appreciated Caleb's steady presence, his humor, and the way he anticipated her needs without being asked. Caleb, in turn, valued Lila's insight, her attentiveness, and the way she brightened every room with her calm strength. Their companionship had evolved into love, rooted in respect and mutual admiration, and nurtured by shared experiences. The community, having observed their growing closeness, began to respond with quiet support. Neighbors offered congratulations, noting that the union, once planned as practical, had become genuine and meaningful. Friends who had once teased or questioned the arrangement now expressed happiness for the couple, seeing the sincerity in their actions and words. Lila and Caleb, though aware of the attention, were no longer constrained by it. They walked together openly, worked together cheerfully, and shared their lives without fear of judgment, confident in the bond they had nurtured. Autumn brought moments of reflection. Lila often sat beneath the wide-open sky, thinking about the journey that had led her here, from the careful planning of a sham marriage to the unexpected depth of connection she now felt. She realized that life had a way of surprising even the most careful planners. The feelings she had once thought to control had grown into love, gentle and persistent, transforming her perspective on relationships, trust, and companionship. Caleb, too, reflected on the journey. He saw how much he had grown through patience, observation, and shared responsibility, and he felt gratitude for the unexpected joy that Lila had brought into his life. Together, they began to envision a future built on the foundations of both practicality and affection. They spoke of plans for their home, for the care of animals and land, and for continuing traditions while also creating new ones together. They discussed dreams, hopes, and the small joys that would shape their life. The shared breakfasts, quiet evenings under the stars, and the laughter that had become a daily presence. Their love was no longer hidden or constrained by agreements. It was acknowledged, nurtured, and celebrated. Even in moments of challenge, their bond held strong. Unexpected storms, difficult chores, and occasional disagreements tested their patience, but they approached each situation with the understanding and respect they had developed over the months. They communicated openly, supported each other's choices, and balanced independence with companionship. Each challenge they faced became an opportunity to strengthen their partnership, reinforcing the lessons of trust, honesty, and care that had guided them from the beginning. One evening, as the sun set behind the mesas, casting long shadows over the plains, Lila and Caleb sat together by a small fire. The air was cool, the sky filled with stars, and the world seemed quiet and at peace. Lila leaned against Caleb, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "I never expected this," she said softly. "I thought I could plan everything, keep my heart safe, and live a life free from complication. But now I wouldn't change a thing." Caleb smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Neither would I," he replied. It's more than I ever imagined, and I know we'll face everything together no matter what comes." The moment was simple, yet profound. They had transformed their lives, taking what had begun as a careful, practical arrangement and turning it into genuine, heartfelt love. Their bond was rooted in trust, mutual respect, and shared experiences, yet it had blossomed into something far greater, a partnership of hearts, minds, and lives. They knew that life would continue to present challenges, but they faced the future with confidence, knowing they would do so together. The journey of Lila and Caleb had taught them both valuable lessons. Life cannot always be controlled or predicted, no matter how carefully planned. True connection often grows quietly, nurtured by patience, understanding, and shared experiences. And sometimes, what begins as practicality can transform into love, creating a life richer, deeper, and more fulfilling than either could have imagined. Lila realized that her heart, once guarded, could find joy and security in the love of another without sacrificing independence. Caleb discovered that devotion and respect, when paired with affection, could create a bond stronger than any he had known. In the months that followed, their lives continued in harmony. Mornings were filled with shared work and laughter, afternoons with tending the land, and evenings with quiet conversation under the vast desert sky. They celebrated small victories, supported each other through difficulties, and cherished every moment of companionship. Their love, born quietly from practicality, had grown into a partnership that balanced independence, respect, and affection. And so, the young Apache woman who had once sought a sham marriage found something far greater, a heart that matched hers in sincerity, strength, and devotion. Caleb, the cowboy who had entered the arrangement with caution, discovered a love that touched him deeply, changing his life in ways he had never anticipated. Together, they faced the world, not as two individuals bound by convenience, but as partners united by trust, love, and the shared understanding that life's true gifts often come when least expected.